So now that we've looked at options menus, let's take a minute and look at the other type of menus that you can create, which is a context menu. So let's look at an example here. So I'm on the emulator, and I'm going to go into the gallery application, which is the application where we can view our photos on the device. So I'm going to go into all pictures. And the way a context menu works is Android has a unique mechanism called the long press or the long click, where you press down on an item and hold it down for a second. And what this does is it can spawn a context menu with some options in which you can do something with that particular object. So if I click and hold down on this photo, we can see it now pops up this context menu with a bunch of different actions that I can do to this. I can view it, share it, crop it, etc. So that's what we're going to do here now. So I'm going to go to Eclipse. Now I've created a blank project. I've called it context menus. And I've just come in and changed the root layout to a relative layout with gravity set to the center, and then just brought a button out here, just so we have a centered button. And what we're going to do is when we long press on this button, we're going to spawn a context menu. What we first need to do is actually create our menu, and we're going to do that in XML. So I'm going to create a new XML file, and I'm going to call this context_menu.xml. And this is going to be of type menu. What I'm going to do is add a couple of items here. And again, this is exactly the same process we did when we dealt with options menus. So let me set the ID, and I'm going to do @ plus because this is going to be a new ID, and we're going to call it item 1. And then the next thing I'm going to do is to set the title property. I'll also just call it item 1. It doesn't really matter. And let me just copy this. We're just going to add 2 items here. But again, it can contain as many as you want, and it will actually create a scrolling list of options for you. So I'm going to change that to item 2, and then also the title to item 2. So we're going to save that. Now in order to make the menu appear, we need to go into our Java code. So go into main.java. And inside of here, what we're going to do is to get a reference to that button and basically set up the context menu. So let's create a new instance of button. I'll call it B. Find view by ID. And there's our button. And then I'm going to make sure I cast it to button. So if we want to be able to respond to a context menu, we need to call the register for context menu method. And then we need to pass in the view that we want to register, and that's our button view right here. So now this button can respond and display a context menu. To create the context menu, we're going to do an override of a method here in the activity class called onCreateContextMenu. So we're doing that override. We're going to leave this call to super constructor, or to the super method rather, intact. And then much like we did for options, we're going to create a new instance of the menu inflator class. I'll call it inflator. Then we need to say get menu inflator. And now from here, we simply just want to inflate that menu that we just created in that XML file. So inflator.inflate. Now we give the ID for the menu that we want to inflate, and it's our context menu. And then the last thing here is we can just leave at the default. So now this is going to create our context menu. So let's go ahead and test it. So we'll run this. Obviously, it's an Android application, and we'll come over to the emulator, and we'll wait for this to launch up. So here's our centered button. And I'm going to click and hold on it, and you can now see that it's popped up our context menu with certain options. So I can click on item 1 or item 2. But obviously, we're going to want to respond to that event and do something useful. So we're going to do another override here, and that is on context item selected. So in this override, again, very similar to what we did in the options menu, we can determine which one was clicked by using the item.getItemID. If the first one was pressed, we can do a certain action. We went over that already, so I'm not going to do it here. But that's the method that you need to respond to in order to get information about it. So now we can go back to our menu, and there's a couple of other options I want to show you. So inside of here, one of the things that we can do is to add a checkable behavior. And this is basically if we want the options menu to act like checkboxes or radio buttons. So to do that, we're going to wrap these items inside of a group tag. So I'm going to create a group tag, and I'm going to set the checkable behavior property. And we have three options. We have none, which is just a regular list of options, all, which is going to be basically like checkboxes, and then single, which will be only one can be selected. So that's essentially like a radio button. So we're going to do that, and we'll wrap that group around these items like that. So now we essentially have a list of radio buttons that we can select. And this is obviously really good if we have a setting screen or some type of option that we want to choose. So let's see what that looks like. Let's run it in the emulator. And now this time we're going to have a menu with a set of options that we can choose from. So I'll long press on that button, and now you can see it comes up as a set of radio buttons. So when we click, we select that one, and now there's full APIs we can reference in the Java to make a certain item be checked or unchecked when we relaunch it again. But just letting you know, you do have those options available to you. So if you want something to be a radio button, you use checkable behavior equal to single. If you do checkable behavior all, that means all of them are checkable, which means they act more like a sequence of checkboxes.